So shout out to comedy. I know I've seen some people that are be like, "Whoa, this new special is really not that funny." It's not supposed to be.
I think hip hop will always be a voice for the people.
What's happening, dude?
Reggie Williams. Oh man, so much going on in the world, huh?
Yeah, Jake Payne. A lot going on in the world. That's what I want to start talking about, man. So you and I, we had a lot of conversations about this over the years, right? Like, we are a hip hop publication. The expectation is for us to talk about music, videos, hip hop news, etc. But we always spoke about much more than that. We had an active lifestyle category. We talked about everything from what was going on with the NFL and Kaepernick to Black Lives Matter movement of the early aughts or teens, I should say.
Yeah.
We talked about artificial intelligence. We talked about a bunch of stuff, a big range. But what do you think our role and responsibility is as a primarily hip hop platform to cover other stuff, if any? What's our duty to our audience?
I think it's a big duty. I mean, I think that hip hop has always been a reflection of first the people, as well as, the streets worldwide. And these are issues that are happening with the people and in the streets. And, just looking at the events, the tragedies of the last month, there's also, if you want to be devil's advocate and say, shut up and dribble about, hip hop journalism, George Floyd worked with DJ Screw. It's like Trayvon Martin grew up with Space Ghost Perp, which was a producer for, A$AP Rocky. Like, so many of these tragedies, if you dig a little deeper, have hip hop ties. So yeah, I don't think there's any excuse not to cover, not to talk about it, not to treat it with the utmost. And that's something that Ambrosia for Heads as a website did, under your vision and some of my execution. But absolutely, in this platform, I don't want to participate if we're not talking about it, and to quote the signs that you see, that I've seen in the protests, silence is violence.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I think Chuck D said, he either said that hip hop was the black CNN or the CNN of the streets. But
Yeah.
in any case, ever since The Message, hip hop has been recounting what is happening in the real world. I think it, as much as any genre of music, is really about talking about what's happening with people.
Yeah.
Sometimes people party, sometimes people, are out like, showing their cars and clothes and whatever it might be. Other times people are in the streets, man, and people are getting killed, and hip hop talks about all of it. So yeah, I've always thought that we had a responsibility, like you, to do that. So
and
go ahead.
Well, one thing I might want to add too, some of what AFH is modeled after is, the most informative years of The Source. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the interesting things that I consumed over the last week, and, you and I haven't done a traditional, Reggie and Jake podcast in 3 or 4 weeks, but the Popcast, which is a New York Times podcast hosted by their music editor, John Caramonica, and he interviewed folks, I believe James Bernard and Reginald Dennis, about how they treated the LA riots, The Source in 92. And, they said no matter what, we had to cover it. And they were, a publication that was on the front lines when your times and your lives, a lot of people were scared to go to South Central. So in the spirit of the pioneers of this, absolutely, and I encourage anyone that values hip hop coverage and how hip hop interprets what's going on in the streets to check out that podcast, because it's one of the better things that I've listened to just in this climate that we're currently in.
Yeah, it's amazing. I had an opportunity to, I went to school with the guys who created The Source. Dave Mays was a couple years ahead of me. in college, and you know, I knew John Schechter, and you know, a lot of all the guys who like really first started it. You know, I didn't know like Reginald Dennis and people like that,
Yeah.
but I got a chance to meet James Bernard maybe 4 years or so ago. I think I
Hmm.
told you about it. Like we sat down, and it blew me away that he said that he thought that we were the 2000s version of what they were. You know,
Yeah.
so that was like, and Dave and I still, you know, talk to this day, and I know that he has respect for us too. So like, yeah, I definitely appreciate that analogy. Um, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on, and it's been going on for a couple weeks. It's really been going on for, you know, centuries if you think about it. Um, Being in the media, we see news cycles come and go. You know, and I've developed a pretty healthy amount of cynicism. Like every time I think that there's a movement afoot, a lot of times, like, you know, it's on to the next one as soon as the next, like, you know, thing that is going to generate a lot of clicks starts to happen.
Hmm.
I would say that there have been two notable exceptions that I can remember in the last like 10 years or so. One is Arab Spring, and the other is the Me Too movement. You know, those two things were sustained and yielded and are still yielding systemic change. Do you think that this is a time that qualifies as a news cycle, or do you think that we are truly in the midst of systemic change when it comes to Black lives and you know, and really recognizing the historical legacy of this country and oppression of Black people and the desire to change that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe we are at the crossroads of systemic change. I hope so. Optimistically, I do. And yeah, I mean, this hasn't, both what's happening in the streets and what's causing it has certainly not quieted down since George Floyd and you know, Breonna Taylor, and all, you know, the martyrs, I'll use that term, before. So yeah, I really, the pressure is now on the powers that be to change, and there's a lot at stake. And I hope that this is a watershed moment, which may take years to actualize, but you know, there's a war cry: no justice, no peace. So as we approach the tipping point of what justice is going to look like, we will see. And I hope that it's an hour of systemic change. What about you?
Man, I don't know. You know, every time like I think that the tipping point has been reached, like I'm proven wrong. You know,
Hmm.
like I was in college in 1992. I was a senior in college, and I remember distinctly my roommates and I, four, you know, three Black men. Um, we, you know, when the Rodney King tape leaked, we thought, oh man, here we go. Now it's finally, you know, everything that like NWA has been saying, that, you know, Public Enemy's been saying, that KRS-One has been saying, is now like, you know, come to light. This isn't just rappers, like, you know, and, you know, giving tales. And, you know, we as Black folk already knew what the deal was, you know, but now the entire world is going to see what's happening. And then for, you know, that verdict to come out the way that it did was a real shocker, because, you know, in the past, yeah, okay, you know, it's, you know, white person's word against a Black person's, and we know how that played out. But to have it be on camera and for that to happen, you know, was insane. And then you fast forward, you know, it's not like the killings had stopped, but then there was a real movement where there was a series of videos. Now, Trayvon, unfortunately, was not caught on video, but you saw Eric Garner. Um, we didn't see Michael Brown, but, you know, we saw how that unfolded.
The dash
And
cam of Sandra Bland, and
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, just on and on and on, right? And I'd say, what was that? It was like 2012 to like 2016 or so, with I think it
Mhm.
kind of culminating with you know, I think it was 2 or 3 days time between when Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were
Yeah,
killed, and we reached a boiling point summer of
2016.
2016. You
Yeah.
know, that's when, and now we know, like, you know, historically we can look back now and know that a lot of the dissension being sown was done by state operatives. You know, Russia was involved in, like, you know, stoking that. It was an election year, very much like this year, and there was a vested interest in creating discord in our society to divide us and polarize the electorate. And we see how that turned out. And then after Trump was elected, the killings didn't stop, but the furor was not covered in the same way by the media. and it made it seem like the movement died, you know, until this summer. Coincidentally, an election summer again. I mean, it feels very much to me like there are a lot of parallels there. And I don't know that the media will continue to cover this when it's not a spotlight, when it's not like, you know, newsworthy or being ginned up by some outside, you know, forces or whatever. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. You know, I was in the streets. You know, I was at a protest in Hollywood that was really big last week, and it was amazing to see the diversity that was there. But you know, I already feel like it's losing a little bit of steam. You know, I try to unplug as much as I can, just because it's just so toxic to consume too much media. I checked in yesterday to see, you know, what happened in Atlanta with Rashard Brooks. I haven't seen what the aftermath has been, but has there been an intensification of like protests, or is it still, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I took an armchair look at it. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you saw, they you know, in response to what happened, that Wendy's is caught on fire and is, you know, smeltering. But the protests have ramped up, you know, and that's been a development of the last 24 hours for sure.
Well, one thing is for sure, there's definitely not going to be a shortage of killings to keep this, you know, in the news cycle should people choose to cover it, you know. But I look at things like gun violence, you know, and you know, we had, you know, Columbine, and then like UVA, and like, you know, Sandy Hook. You know, Sandy Hook seemed like it's going to be a watershed moment because you had first graders getting killed, and that didn't do it, you know. And then, you know, we had Vegas, 51 people killed. That didn't cause massive gun reform. And then, you know, when Parkland happened, was the first time I started to think, oh man, this is really going to affect change, because it wasn't the pundits, it wasn't adults, it was the kids leading the charge, and that was sustained for, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that faltered, you know. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. You bring up, you make that parallel, and I get it, and I wonder, and I say this, you know, I speculate, and that systemic change happens as a white man, and I haven't lived on the other side of, you know, this, and so my perspective, you know, it only but means so much, if anything. But you know, you mentioned those shootings, and one of the things, you know, that's transpired in recently is, you know, Dave Chappelle's special, and you know, I know we want to talk about it. One of the things that really blew me away, I'm somebody who considers himself a bit of a history buff. The only time the NRA stood for a ban on assault rifles was when the Panthers took the state capitol steps.
Isn't that insane? Yeah.
That's insane. That is insane. So shout out to comedy. I know I've seen some people that are be like, "Oh, this new special is really not that funny." It's not supposed to be. It's not at all. It's everything that you know, when Dave recently, just over the last few years, has talked about the purity of the medium of a microphone and a person. He really manifests that in this new special.
Yeah. So tell me what your thoughts were. Like, break it down.
Yeah, I mean, it blunted me. You know what I mean? Like it was to see somebody that I've been following for 25 years, to see that visceral anger and hurt. I won't even say anger, just that visceral hurt in a medium, in a performance medium, is something that I think will be one of those things that attaches itself to what's going on right now. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I feel the same about the new Run the Jewels album. Like, this is the way the Chronic is with the, you know, LA protests of '92. This is art and life hand in hand. And I just thought it was super powerful. The thing that, so Dave Chappelle, you know, as for a lot of his life has lived in Ohio, which is next to Pennsylvania. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, I grew up about 30 minutes from the Ohio border. So I'm a little bit familiar with that kind of Midwest, middle America. And I thought it was really interesting that he invited his neighborhood to the barn, to that creative space. And I thought that, you know, above a performance, above everything, this is him speaking to the middle of America, some black, some white, some brown, you know, And I think there's true power in that. But
Yeah, I love Chappelle. One, because he's got like just tremendous like insight. His observations are just so on point, and
yeah,
he cuts the things in ways that most people just can't articulate. But I also love it because he does not hold back. Like he
mhm,
tells things as he sees it. It's his truth. He doesn't care about like what the blowback might be on social media or in the media or whatever. And in a world where the bully pulpit is as high as it's ever been, the social media thing, that's really important because we're moving to a very, very dangerous place. I was talking about this with my sons yesterday. We are we've been dehumanizing one another for the better part of a decade now. It started with social media, where a person can type something to another person that they would never, ever, ever say to
yeah,
that person's face, right? There's a complete detachment from the fact that what you're doing is affecting another human being. And we've seen people, you and I have seen it more than most because, we have a tremendous following. And in posting, every time we posted, we would get feedback from people.
real time.
And it used to be back in the day, like if someone really came at me, like on a personal level, I would like,
Yeah,
I would like go back at them, like
yeah,
not, and often not in a disrespectful way, but just to like, let them know, hey man, like these words that you're saying are affecting a human being. Like, as far as I know, I've never done anything personal to you. So why are you coming at me that way?
right.
And in most cases it yielded really positive results because it did kind of jar the person back into the notion like, oh wow, this is a person. But you know over the years that level of complete callousness has just only built. And I think now in the area of COVID, where almost all of our interactions with people are digital,
Yeah, virtual. Yeah.
whether by text or by Zoom, or whatever video chat you use, I think it's made us even less empathetic and less like acknowledging of the fact that we're human beings, and it's produced a really, really, really ugly culture.
Hmm.
So I worry. But so Dave being able to stand up to that and not be cowed is a hero for me. He said, I can't. He said some really, really, really harsh words about people. I mean, he just was
Candace
just
Owens and
Candace
Laura Ingraham.
Owens and Laura Ingraham. I mean, wow, I was like shocked with
Yeah.
just how like explicit he was and his feelings about them.
But
But
but yeah, and I mean, and at the end of the day, it's like when hip hop has responded to Tommy Loren. I mean, these pundits, if that's the right word to use, their words hurt people, and like I actually really like what Dave Chappelle said to Don Lemon, because I actually happened to be watching, and I'm sure Don Lemon had said that throughout, when the initial wave of protests were happening, but he was like, I want to see Black leaders come forth and say something. And he started mentioning celebrities right away. And I think the special is what Dave Chappelle has to say on it. And I thought what he said, in terms of listening to the streets and not telling the streets what to do, I haven't heard anyone else verbalize it that way. And I think it's hugely powerful.
yeah, and I think that the brutality of his language, whether you agree with it or not, is necessary at this time. I was reading another article, it was a New York Times article last night about Atlanta, and it said that like it was in the wake of protests ensuing after the death of George Floyd, when police officers had pinned him down to the ground, right? So pinned him to the ground is very different than saying a man kneeled on a guy's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Like to say pinned him on the ground, like almost seems like it was an accident, or that like, it was incidental contact.
Standard
Like,
procedure. Yeah.
yeah, like this guy kneeled on his neck for almost 9 minutes, looking around while people told him not to, and the man pled for his life. So, in some ways, you can see why Chappelle or people have to speak in those blunt of terms, and
Yeah.
because otherwise it gets lost. The narrative gets changed, gets watered down, gets diluted. So
And I mean, Chappelle in the last recent years has caught a lot of flack for nouns and verbs,
yeah,
and he has fought that to a T and says that, the minute we start censoring this medium is the minute we have nothing left. And yeah, he used words that I don't, I don't use, but he's entitled to that, and he's taking that and speaking power to those words. And yeah, I thought it was a crazy experience. And afterwards, I sat there for as long as the special was and just absorbed it.
yeah. So you mentioned Don Lemon, right? And so he went at Don Lemon because Don Lemon asked where various voices were, at the height of this. And one of the people he called out was Dave Chappelle. You and I have talked a little bit about hip hop. In the past, the way we chose to cover things through the lens of hip hop was to amplify hip hop voices that were talking about certain things. Killer Mike was someone that I always looked to because, I really appreciate the way that he expresses himself too, and he also is very direct about things and calls it like he sees it.
And he admits he's wrong too at times as well, which is
absolutely
really powerful.
Yeah, and he's very complex, right? He doesn't allow himself to be boxed into holding a single form of expressing himself based on political ideologies and stuff like that. Now he's super complex, which I think is required in a world that is nuanced. But what's your take on where hip hop has been with this one? I haven't seen a ton of expression artistically, but I've seen a lot of people in the streets, you know what I mean? And to Chappelle's point, that might be the bigger thing at this point. Yeah. No one needs to hear a rap song about it. There's been plenty of rap songs about it. Now they want to see people out and acting, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, some powerful music has released almost by happenstance in the middle of it. I mean, obviously, Run the Jewels advanced releasing their album and gave it away for free in the midst of all of this, which is the latest in a series of just thoughtful moves from Killer Mike and LP. But yeah, I mean, to see J. Cole, who has always been protesting, was protesting in the mid-2000 teens, Kendrick Lamar, Wale, people are going out to the streets of all levels, Tech from Smith and across the landscape. I've seen it on my social timelines. And that's hugely powerful. I know here in Philadelphia, I haven't personally seen the artists out, but I'll see through social media that they're, walking in the same protests I am. And yeah, it's powerful. And I really give hip hop credit for not making everything a tribute song. We've seen that before, and there has been some music. D Smoke and Sir came out with a powerful record. I've seen one or two others, but really taking it to the streets above making it about themselves and the quote unquote art. I think that means a lot right now, and I think that's what will endure personally.
Yeah, YG, was one of the key organizers of that massive Hollywood boycott last week. And I thought people wouldn't typically associate YG with having political music and things like that.
Well, I mean, he had the FDT record, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a moment in time,
Yeah. It's a moment in time, and he's not, it's not a general part of his body of work, but for him to be able to lead and galvanize that many people is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So Run the Jewels, I haven't listened to the album yet. I've had a week, as you know. And but I'm definitely going to listen to it today. But what are your thoughts about it? What are some of the themes that emerge?
I mean, throughout the last year and a half, 2 years, I mean, both Mike and Elle have said this is truly a body of work. I don't think they use the words magnum opus because artists don't speak like that, but that this was some other. And I truly believe it's the best body of work that they've put out since their debut. Since oh man, we're getting hit with the chemistry. And the album that they first linked on, which is Killer Mike's R.A.P. album, LP produced the whole thing. It was Mike's album. but it released, if I'm not mistaken, right into Occupy. And a lot of the themes of that album were like, oh my goodness, this just happens to fit what's going on in the world. And RTJ4, yeah, you know, Mike has a particular verse. Let me tell you the name of it. I know it's got snow in the title. I'm still warming up to titles, but Walking in the Snow. That is like, I believe, you know, he's referencing Eric Garner, but it applies to George Floyd, and just the power and that boisterousness. You know, RTJ's always been in the tradition, in my minds, of like Ice Cube, Public Enemy, a little bit of X-Clan, and you damn sure get that here.
Yeah. You know, Mike is one of the most powerful voices out there, so it's perfect time for Run the Jewels album. Yeah, I'm curious to when Kendrick is going to drop his album. You know, and that it was going to be this year. I think you and I spoke on that before. I can't wait, man. He's obviously one of the most important voices to me, but I think his voice needs to be heard now too. I think he makes sense of the world in a way that a lot of people can't. You know, so.
Most definitely, you know, and I wonder too, I mean, you and I spoke about it a little bit with COVID, but how, if you were 2/3 or 3/4 through making an album, or you were putting the finishing touches on it, if this event changes it, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know. And it's up to each individual artist, but I'm quite sure this will affect the art that we're about to hear for the years that come.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and you know, Kendrick he's always expressed himself in ways that are universal and in some ways timeless.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the self-discovery that he went through on Damn is something that like lives beyond like any particular point in time. So. And I think that he did that with Good Kid. You know, it was about his youth. To Pimp a Butterfly was very much pertinent to what's going on now. So my assumption is that whatever he puts out isn't going to be altered or seen as tone deaf or anything like that without having acknowledged specific events. So
Yeah,
I doubt that he's going to alter it significantly. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely. I don't think he did with Damn. You know,
no,
he only had like one or two veiled references to Trump in the entire album. So
that's a really good point. Yeah, and that came out a year. Well, no, it came out 6 months roughly.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, part of the change that's going on is happening in the music business. There was the media blackout last week, and then also Universal Republic announced that they were going to eliminate the term urban. And only because of like perceived negative connotations to that, you know, and devaluing the form of music, and only going to use like R&B and hip hop and things like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I say this as, you know, somebody with almost 20 years in the business and a white guy. I cringe at the term urban, especially, you know, I mean, it's even more funny in recent years when you've got a Lil Nas X and you've got artists that, you know, even, you know, that so many country artists, not just country as a genre, but, you know, folks from you know, rural Mississippi and rural Alabama and all of that have come on the scene. That term is so archaic. And yeah, I think, you know, I saw the Grammys change some wording around for categories too. Again, like that's not systemic, but I think that these events have everyone looking within and saying, what is it that I do that's messed up? And how can I fix it?
Yeah, the progression was, you know, it used to be called black music. Like there was no
race records. Yeah.
Race records to black music, like, you know, no bones about it. And you know, that always blew me away because music doesn't have a color. You know, the people who make the music, you know, are in theory like have, you know, specific colors, but like the music that they make can wildly vary. You know, you had like, you know, black people making like heavy metal and punk, and you know, white people making R&B and rap. And so like music doesn't have a color in that way, you know. But urban always to me seemed like a euphemism for black, you know.
Music doesn't have a color, but I will say, and maybe this is fake woke shit on my part, I don't know, but like I've made it a point to use the word black and brown when it comes to not types of music, but in the discussion. Because as white folks have come into jazz and come into blues and come into hip hop and come into rap, at a certain level, it can lose its origin story to some people. And so it's been important to me that I don't ever not attribute the culture that I love and the culture that I belong to Black and Hispanic, and sure, I'm sure that, there's white pioneers, but I can't lose sight of that in the discussion. And maybe that's wrong on my part, but for whatever reason, I've just seen a lot of whitewashing going on in culture, and it's important that we just state that. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess the flip side for me though is that it's also used against Black artists a lot of times. So like for a long time, artists like Michael Jackson and Beyonce and Rihanna, who were dominating the pop charts, were not acknowledged as pop stars, right? Michael Jackson aggressively branded himself that way. He was very tactical in calling himself the king of pop. Yeah. Right? I'm not the king of R&B. I'm not the king of soul. I'm the king of pop. That was like that was a chess move on his part, because people were still trying to put him in a box, and he had blown through that box. And that's not to like say that the R&B box is a bad box. Mm-hmm. It's just saying acknowledge that, R&B, hip hop, these are pop forms of pop music too. And I'm dominating pop.
Yeah.
So,
And that's a really good point. And so many artists, I mean, you can look at a Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, you can look at, even Kanye. So many artists are proving genre to just be like almost like a guidepost or, a lighthouse that doesn't have a bulb in. Like, what is genre in the era of the iPod, let alone, Spotify? Everyone is able to dibble and dabble.
Yeah, I didn't realize it until I watched Justin Timberlake's Hot Ones. But, apparently when he put out Justified, he was actually really, really upset that they wouldn't classify it as R&B. He set out to make an R&B record. He made it with Timbaland and Pharrell, who were dominating the R&B charts at the time. And it sounded like a combination of a Prince and Michael Jackson album.
Yeah,
distinctly R&B, yet he was categorized as pop. So yeah, the racism and the nomenclature of the music business has existed for a long time. So I do think that Universal Republic making this move is a signal that at least they're acknowledging it, and trying to affect change. So you mentioned the Grammys too. What's your thought on their changes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still
changes, progressive R&B.
Right.
And what is it?
Melodic.
And what's it melodic? What I can't remember.
It's like melodic hip hop, not collaboration, but hold on one second. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm still digesting that because best melodic rap performance.
Right. Instead of best rap song performance, it's best melodic rap performance, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the Grammys have had so many missteps in the last decade. And so for this one, cynically, I was just like, just give it to Post Malone next year. Just give it to, whomever fits that bill. And not for nothing. I mean, God Bless the Dead, Juice WRLD was headed in that melodic direction, but I don't know. Do you have any reaction to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, progressive R&B. Okay, like why can't it just be R&B, right? Like progressive R&B. What I don't even know what that is. Like,
I thought we were done with progressive after prog rock. Like
yeah. And then melodic rap, like that completely changes what the category was, right? It was best rap song performance, which I understood to be a rap song that featured a singing part, like a hook,
Right. Whether it was a collaborator or it was all in-house.
Yeah, like Crazy in Love or whatever, a feature with either a singer and a rapper, the singer, the rapper on the hook with a verse, or like rapper, like any Wale joint, right? Name a Wale song. Best melodic rap, but that's just ushering in. You know, it's ushering in auto-tune rap. You know,
Yeah,
which is fun. That's been the dominant form of hip hop for
yeah.
the last X amount of years. But yeah, you're right. Like, I actually don't know that that cuts a long race because, like, that was started by Ye, and pretty much Drake.
I
Every
did
Drake song
see.
is that way. 21
I,
Savage. So there's a lot of that.
I did see a Twitter user named Amir Saad, so
Mhm.
AMIR, and then said SAID, and he made a really good point. He was like rhythm, and again, like this is one that I can't speak to personally, but I thought it was interesting. He said rhythm has always been like something that has African heritage. Melody comes from another place. So is this again making this award, taking it out of the roots of you know Pan-African music? I don't know. I mean, but I just thought that was an interesting point that I've never thought of.
Well, I guess what I'd say is I do think that it's shifting it from what it used to be, right? So, and okay, if I think you keep the rap song category, you add the melodic rap category, and you add and then you add it to Amir's point, you add a rhythmic rap category too, right? And that then addresses kind of like the traditional form of rap that is more, rhythm based, and there's no melody. It's just cadence. So yeah, I think that you tackle it that way.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, again, cynically, this is a way to involve a type of artist, I think, or a class of artists, some of which applies to both categories, but some of these artists that have been right now, the Grammys would have hell to pay if they put them up for best rap album. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? This plays to those. This truly gives Juice World his Grammy, in 2019.
yeah, yeah. So speaking of melody, we've had a break now in Swiss Beats' verses, and I know for you, like they were starting to wane, but when we dug down, and I think what was really lacking was the caliber of talent that was being presented for you. But next up is John Legend versus Alicia Keys. Now, does that reinvigorate your interest in it, or are you like, is that a little too like soft for you, or like what? Like, I know you're not an R&B dude. I know you've never been an R&B dude. So
I I have never paid money. I think I bought, or it was sent to me as a promo, but the John Legend Roots Wake Up album. But I was thinking, Alicia Keys and John Legend both have songs I really like. I don't know if either of them have songs that I love. As the weather continues to get nicer and these things tend to happen on Saturday nights, I don't know. I mean, I might tune in on the playback for the sake of this podcast, but this one, it ain't me. What
well,
about
it's
you?
it's going to be on Juneteenth, which I think
Okay.
is dope.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge John Legend fan. I like John Legend on features more. Like actually, I
Hmm.
think John Legend on Ross joints, like the Magnificent, like it's just like that's probably too like R&B for you, but like but him with like that like really appeals to me. Like somebody once said that he sounds like the Warner Brothers frog when he sings, like the
That's funny. Yeah.
vibrato kind of gets to me. I like some of his songs, and he's a really dope dude, personally. Alicia Keys, like there are a lot of songs of hers that I really like, and she's got like some very like powerful songs, and I like the hip hop essence she brings to it and
Yeah.
everything too. So I'll tune in just as a fan of the competition, and just out of curiosity to see the kind of numbers they have, because um, while Nelly and Luda were both gigantic in their time was 15 to 20 years ago, really, if you think about it.
Especially for Nelly. I don't know about
Yeah,
Luda, but he
yeah,
hangs around.
yeah. But these guys, John and Alicia, yeah, their time was probably, I don't know, like their peak was probably what, like 7, 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, but they both stay around and they both have similar trajectory into artists and now into, activists and, what's the word I'm looking for? Like philanthropist.
Yeah, So I'll say they're peak musically, right? As personalities,
Yeah.
I think John Legend's bigger than he's ever been.
Right.
With his work with La La Land, and like he and Chrissy are like a royal family out there with B&J and Kanye and Kim, Alicia and Swizz, of course,
Huge.
which
Yeah.
that so there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. I'm sure her sound might be sounding more crispy than John's. She's got the in-house
Yeah.
advantage, but her hosting the Grammys and everything. So in my mind, they're the two biggest current personalities to do this. They both have tremendous social media following. So I'm very curious to see what kind of numbers they do. Do you think they can? I think the biggest so far is about 750 or so for Jill.
What was that, Jill and Erica?
Jill and Erica, yeah. Do you think these guys can top 1 million?
Yeah, I mean, just because this is something that, like, my mom, who's, she'll punch me for this, but is close to 70, like, she will hear about this through the morning show circuit. Like, will she tune in? Maybe, yeah, I bet this one breaks a milli.
You think it'll break 1 million? I don't know, man. Maybe, yeah. It's also at nighttime. It's Juneteenth, first of all, which I think is pretty cool.
Which is not a Saturday. That's a Sunday, right? Am I not mistaken?
Friday.
Friday, excuse me.
This coming Friday. Yeah.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, and you know what will be really cool about this, no matter what? I mean, even not invested in the music to the extent of other people, like you said, I mean, these are such good souls. You know what I mean? And I imagine sort of like Erica and Jill, the quality of the rapport will be a moment, But yeah, if there's like a sweep of rain across the East Coast or something, that might help push it over 1 million, because these, now that it's June after quarantine, not that it's over, I've noticed a lot of people in the streets. So
yeah, people are out, man. So we're talking about two of the biggest names in music and two of the biggest personalities on the planet, potentially collectively together getting 1 million simultaneous viewers on Instagram, right? And that is speculative. We're both speculating as to whether or not it can occur. Tekashi 6ix9ine did double that with his IG live. And he just released a new song, and it's got 76 million views on YouTube, the video, in 2 days. I think it's the fastest growing video ever released on YouTube. What is it, dude? Why is this guy such a powerhouse when it comes to media consumption?
I mean, it's he knows how to stroke the fire. And I listened to the song one time.
Did you like it?
No, I think I will go through the rest of my life never listening to it again. Yeah, I'm so over, dude. Like, and I was never, I never got on the bandwagon. There's a lot of artists adjacent to him that I found interesting, and they had songs that I would dig here or there, but nah. And this one, for reasons we spoke about in our conversation with Justin Hunt, a few episodes back, I'm changing the channel.
Man, I want to change the channel. I feel compelled to check in just because of what we do. We got to stay on the pulse. I was having a conversation with my son the other day, who I just brought back from New York, and I told him that I had TikTok, and he was like, "Why do you have TikTok? Like, oh man, what do you have TikTok? Dog, like, it's what I do." Yeah. But dog, man, I gotta say, as much as I want to hate, I actually like his music. I think he's incredibly gifted as at picking beats, first of all, and as a songwriter. Like, I think he crafts like good songs. Now, what he's saying and everything, it is what it is, and like, I don't like what he stands for at all, and that's not even the snitching, right? Snitching is like, I don't like the fact that he was, a bully, and like, promoting this like complete like thuggish, immoral lifestyle, but the songs are just dope, and to me, and I think that's a big part of it. I think if he came out and didn't have good music,
Yeah.
he'd be irrelevant.
So you like Trollz? You like the new record with Nicki Minaj?
I do, and I'm curious to what you think about Nicki because, like, so hip hop has its stance right on it. The streets have spoken, and for Nicki to kind of break ranks on it, I see it as breaking ranks first of all, but I'm curious as to whether or not you do, and like whether and what the significance is of her appearing.
I'm not sure if we knew that this collaboration was out yet, but what was it? In the last 10 days, Akon made a Locked Up. I don't know if you saw that or had the chance to see it, but on live, him and Dude, sat at the piano and made kind of a Locked Up 2.
Really?
So Akon was kind of the first out the gate, and I'll give a shout out to the Joe Budden podcast. They know a lot more on the subject than I do. They spoke about the connection that Akon has with the Grange family, even currently, long after the Universal deal. So I feel like he was the crash test dummy. You can make a case. First of all, the first Locked Up is a dope record. I always liked the joint. But I'm not up on what Akon's doing. I think he still is like a top draw from what I understand touring. But the idea that Akon has less to lose, I don't know. Nicki in the hip hop community, I don't know. I mean, I think that some of her moves over the last 2 years have been very suspect. And this one, she definitely, pushed a lot of chips to the center of the table. That's a big risk. What do you think?
So I think that now that you mentioned Akon too, I think that in both cases, the reason driving their participation is the same, and that's to heighten their relevancy. Akon has not been relevant as a musician in 10, 12, 15 years. And Nicki, I believe, to what you just said, right just now, has been losing her relevancy in music for some time. And I think that she took a lot of desperate measures going after Cardi B, stirring up beefs and things like that because the music wasn't there, or at least it didn't catch people.
And complaining about number one spots, with Travis Scott.
Right.
It's tricky.
I don't think Nicki I don't think 2012 Nicki does this.
No. Not at all. Not 2010 Nicki. Not 2010 and 2010 Nicki, when she made my favorite Nicki Minaj work, when I was the biggest fan, was in that run of Monster and the mixtape, Itty Bitty Piggy, like all of that stuff in 09 and 10 I thought was so interesting, into her first album. And even then, when it really could have possibly benefited her the most, I don't think you come out of Young Money, Cash Money, Billionaires and stand with that. I just don't. And
definitely not.
But it makes you wonder too, to the Grange point, like by virtue of doing this, do you see good favor that most artists couldn't conjure themselves down the line? And I know Nicki is, an A-list artist, even in spite of everything, but can this give her the look to end the Cardi B comparison and put her back in the top tier? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, she's definitely going to be fresh in a lot of people's minds. And I just like had a revelation that this was actually potentially a chess move on Nicki's part, a big one. And actually, I got to completely reevaluate my whole stance on this now.
Okay.
Who in the hip hop world went, the hardest at Tekashi 6ix9ine after he came out?
Trippie Redd.
And who else? Who had a vested interest in Prison and Meek Mill?
Okay. Oh, word.
Meek Mill.
Okay.
Meek Mill
Yeah,
was very hard.
right.
So, obviously we know Nicki and Meek's history. You think this was a shot?
It's interesting. I mean, I wonder if
it could be both, right? But I'm just saying it's more layered than just.
Yeah, and it could be strategic alliances too, because both Meek and Cardi B are part of the Atlantic family, where they, luck up each other and do major collaborations. Yeah, I mean, this could all tie into that. And no matter what, people are tuning in, Tekashi's interviews do even better than his music, as I understand it, you know, when he jumps on live. But I challenge you a little bit. I mean, we're talking about music, but is he as a person still part of the hip hop conversation anymore? I don't know. At what point do we say, okay, we've absorbed the what are we going to do with him narrative as a snitch? Now what? And push him to the side the same way that hip hop, you know, has done with, I don't know if hip hop did that with Marky Mark in the 90s, you know, like these kind of like pop up artists. I don't know. I don't know.
Is he still hip hop? You're asking me? Is Tekashi 6ix9ine still hip hop?
Is it still a cultural responsibility to care what he's doing?
Oh, you mean us as journalists, or?
Yeah, us as hip hop heads even too. Like hip hop heads get the luxury of like, if I don't like it, I don't like it. But as somebody who wants to understand the whole space, is he still meaningful on our radar?
I think he has to be.
Hmm.
I think he does. Like, listen, when we're posting on the site, would we have posted either one of these two songs? No, not at all, because that's not our brand. It's not the type of hip hop that we put forward.
Unless it was through the lens of the lyrics that he cops to his pleas of like, you would snitch too.
Right.
But that, to play to your point, I think we would have fleshed it out the way that we are right now and come to the realization that that's just a cop out for page views and we're going to sit this one out because what he said wasn't that compelling.
But news cycle wise,
No.
he's still a very, I think, a compelling figure, and like if he's making moves, like real moves, I think we would have covered that. I don't think we would cover the music. And I'm not saying we would have covered the cycle. We would have certainly covered his being released.
Yeah.
I think we would have covered potentially the IG success from the standpoint of like, what does it mean for the culture that something like this can happen given what he's done. So I do think he's still relevant in our conversation too, in one way or another. Hence,
but musically, no. And we never covered. I mean, the one thing I'll say is we never covered 6ix9ine on the site as for his music. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and you had put a song, it might have been his joint with Trippie Redd on the playlist for a minute, but
no, it wasn't. No.
You put a Trippie Redd joint on.
Trippie Redd joint, but that was with Trippie like rapping, like with real cadence and rhythm and stuff. Yeah.
So no, I mean, and we obviously covered the trial because it mattered, and it was, and it's like, okay, this is a high profile. Like, what does it mean, and how do the streets, how do hip hop treat a snitch?
Yeah. I want to get to the music. If there's any other stuff you want to discuss, but like I think we should tell people, whoever's made it this far, that we are still very active on our Spotify playlist. And so if you're looking for new hip hop, that's in the ilk of what our brand represent, like we are very, very much in that game and keeping it updated weekly. You can find us on Spotify just under Ambrosia for Heads. But so any other new music that came out that you are really feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be remiss to not talk about Freddie Gibbs and Alchemist. Alfredo. Did you have you had a chance to hear that one?
Doug, I have not. I had a week.
Man. Understandably, and not for nothing too. I've heard a lot of people say, like, had a week or not had a week. It's weird to see what you're seeing on social media, see what you're seeing in the streets, protest, and come home and find a soundtrack. Now, it's been very cool. I will say, the protesting that I've participated in, I always hear hip hop in the background. Like people bring boom boxes, people bring, Beats pills. I've heard a lot of Public Enemy, not only at the protests in Philly, but as well as just coming out of cars. And I don't know if it's terrestrial radio. I don't listen enough, but I've heard a lot of, Fear of the Black Planet, Fight the Power, It Takes a Nation, like 88, 89, 90 PE.
It's interesting because for me, being in LA last week in Hollywood, I heard the West Coast versions of that. Mm-hmm. So I heard NWA, F the Police. I heard YG, F Donald Trump. But dude, like, I think the one that moved me the most, it's one thing to read about All Right becoming the Black Lives Matter, de facto Black Lives Matter anthem. It's another thing to be in a protest with a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people and to have that drop on a big mega system, dude, it
Yeah.
was like it was chills. You know what I mean? Like it was chills. So yeah, yeah.
So, Freddie Gibbs and Madlib made um, what our readers decided was the best album of last year in Bandana.
Hmm.
I'm
I
correct on that, I
co-sign that.
believe.
I
Yeah,
co-sign that.
that and Rhapsody.
As I was gonna say, that and Rhapsody. Those are the two.
So, one thing that's cool about Freddie, and he has the same quality. I think Tupac had it. I think MF Doom has it. Freddie can be incredibly prolific, and perfection isn't expected anytime. Both Freddie and Alchemist work really fast. So I got the sense that this is an album that's not supposed to necessarily be viewed at as a bandana. I'm not saying that Bandana was made over, months and years, but this isn't that. What it is just a really cool merger of the two. I mean, they worked together before at the end of 2018 on the Fetty album, which also had Currency, which I really liked. And this is cool. It's certainly quality, but it's not the definitive Freddie Gibbs album. It's not the definitive Alchemist album. I really, really like the feature choices. Benny's on there, Conway's on there. But yeah, it's cool. I encourage everyone to listen and let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Dope, dope. Well, it's that time, man. What's your song of the week?
So it's interesting, you talk about West Coast protest music. MC8, doesn't get enough credit. He put an album out earlier this year. It's a long ass album called Official. And 8 had come off of working with Premier 3 or 4 years ago on a record that he had been working on for years. This one is like 8 back to his playbook. And the album's cool. 8 deserves props for being just so active. He uses that word a lot. But there's one song on there that I think is truly one of the best 8 records I've heard, even over the stuff he did with Premier. It's called Profiles, or Profile, and it's with Exhibit and Problem out of Compton. And the album came out in February or March, but it's everything that is being talked about in terms of police profiling and what that looks like. And it is just hardcore, West Coast street shit, but it's done really well. And if you're looking for music that captures, the zeitgeist of this, I'll say this just as a hip hop fan to help me, feel it. This is a good record. And Exhibit, just really one of the best Exhibit verses you're going to hear in a while. So that's my joint of the week. It just resonates, and I'm going to keep playing it. What about you?
That's interesting, man. A week ago from yesterday, I was listening to my G-Funk playlist, and G-Funk just sounds different in Cali, man. Like just like driving, and sometimes hearing the streets that they're seeing signs for, like referencing the music at the same time. It's just like it's a different thing, and it was loaded. It's loaded with Compton's Most Wanted, like a lot of Compton's Most Wanted joints, and I was listening to the one I can't remember, but it samples "The Look of Love." The Isaac Hayes joint, the same one that Jay-Z uses on.
Is that Hood Took Me
Count
Under?
Yeah, the Hook Took Me Under. Yeah. Nice. It was just hitting so hard, man. So yeah, I feel you on 8. Like he does not get enough credit, dude. That dude, like the Consequence One and stuff, is unbelievable.
A few weeks ago, I want to get to you, but you made a really ill point about West Side Gun of just like the frequencies of voices. And, recently I've just been thinking a lot about rap voices and like the great ones, Grand Poobah, Chub Rock, so Biggie. I mean, but 8 doesn't come up on people's lists, and 8 just has that voice. That's what made him so incredible on Good Kid, Mad City, on the Mad City joint.
Yeah, his voice and his accent, his accent is like he just got that just quintessential Cali accent, like just even in the Menace to Society, like he just like he embodies it. For me, similar subject, everything that's going on. It's been Talking Heads burning down the house, obviously we had that incredible conversation with Prince Paul and Don Newkirk last week. And I think I had known at some point that Bernie Worrell played with Talking Heads, but it's buried in the recesses. But for them to talk about that made me go back and explore their catalog, and Burning Down the House, just has been relevant to me on a lot of levels this week and the last couple of weeks. So
one of my favorite lyrics of, and I'm a huge, Talking Heads is in my top 3, probably definitely top 5, you know, bands of all time. And there's a lyric in there which I really hope, in a good light, it could be in a negative light, but watch out, you just might get what you're after, you know. And that lyric just, you know, and people of color, Black people in this country deserve what they're after. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the summer plays out.
Yeah. Yo, pleasure, man. This is healing for me. You know what I mean? This is healing for me. So thank you. Always good to see you. Always good to chop it up. So yeah.
Likewise, man.
Yeah.
Until next time, marathon continues, man.
Word. All right, peace.